يحيى خذ الكتاب بقوة وآتيناه الحكم صبيا إذ قال الله يا عيسى إني متوفيك ورافعك إلي محمد رسول الله.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا، من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Surah Al-Kahf is the surah that talks about the different trials in this life. The trial when it comes to matters of religion, which is the most important thing in our life, is to establish the religion, to establish the deen, and the different trials that might take people away from it. And that's the story of the people of Al-Kahf. That's what the surah is named after them, the people of the cave. There is the fitna of wealth and how the wealth can divert the person away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or bring him closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's the story of the owner of the two gardens. And then there is the fitna or the trial of knowledge. And that's the story of Musa alayhi salam and Al-Khadr. And this is where we stopped right before the verse that talks about that story of Musa alayhi salam and Al-Khadr. And then after that, the story of Dhul Qarnayn, which refers to a sulta or power and leadership, and which is also a trial from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether a person would use it in a good way or abuse the power, as some might do that. So the story of Musa alayhi salam and Al-Khadr, what we are interested in knowing is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Qur'an. And therefore, when we listen to the verses and understand the meaning of it, there's many great benefits, many great lessons. The ulama, they extracted so many benefits from these verses in the story of Musa alayhi salam and Al-Khadr, the virtue of knowledge and the importance of it, and how a prophet of Allah, Musa alayhi salam, one of the ulil azm min ar-rusul, the mighty messengers of Allah, and he would travel for a distance to seek knowledge that he doesn't have from someone that is of a lesser degree and level than him, of course, which is Al-Khadr. And whether the debate even among the ulama, whether he's a prophet or not, is a debatable issue. So, but definitely for sure, he is lesser in level than Musa alayhi salam. And still Musa alayhi salam would go to him to seek knowledge. And it shows us the amazing secrets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the face of earth and the belief in the qadr of Allah. And this is to understand, and when we're given some of the knowledge, we should humble ourselves to it and gain knowledge of the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala based on the revelation from Allah. So let's inshallah ta'ala go through some of the verses. Otherwise, the verses of the story are so many, but we'll take the first 10 verses from verse number 60 to verse number 70 in Surah Al-Kahf about the story of Musa alayhi salam and Al-Khadr. The ayah says, verse number 60, وإذ قال موسى لفتاه لا أبرح حتى أبلغ مجمع البحرين أو أمضي حقبا. And mention when Musa alayhi salam said to his servant, I would not cease traveling until I reach the junction of the two seas or continue for a long period. وإذ قال موسى. And remember when Musa alayhi salam said this. So this is one of the ways where the stories are mentioned in the Quran as if you're being told, and this is to the Prophet ﷺ, and remember and mention وَإِذْ قَالَ مُوسَى لِفَتَاهُ. When Musa alayhi salam, Prophet Musa alayhi salam, he said to his fata. His fata is al-fata is the, as also is mentioned from the story of the people of the cave, إِنَّهُمْ فِتْيَةٌ. They are fitya, young people. They have the young in age, they are strong in strength. And it's also used for the servant as a way to honor the servant, actually, instead of saying a servant, but rather to say fatah. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ, when he even said to the people, when it comes to don't call your slave my slave, but rather say my fatah, as if you're saying it even in an informal way, my boy. this is my man, like, something like this. So when he said to لفتاه, to his servant, and this was said to be Yusha ibn Nun, one of the prophets of Allah, لا أبرح, he said to him, I would not depart. لا أبرح, that means I won't leave my place. لا أبرح, I would not stop traveling, because he was traveling, and that's what the verses starts from that scene here. And of course there are things before it, and it's mentioned in some of the hadith of the Prophet والسلام, that Musa alayhi salam had heard of a man that he has knowledge that Musa alayhi salam doesn't have, which is Al-Khadr alayhi salam. So Musa alayhi salam, this was because Musa alayhi salam, when he was asked about something, and he said, I do not know anyone more knowledgeable than me. And he did not refer the matter to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed to Musa alayhi salam, there is someone that has more knowledge than you. So Musa alayhi salam wanted to seek knowledge from him, wants to even travel to him and humbling himself to the knowledge, to seek knowledge that he doesn't have. So he reached, or he was traveling to try to find Al-Khadr, and he was given signs by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala how to find him. He's where to find him, because he's not someone that is stationed in a place. So signs for him while he's traveling till he get to reach Al-Khadr. So the ayah says, وَإِذْ قَالَ مُوسَى لِفَتَاهُ, when Musa alayhi salam said to his servant, لَا أَبْرَحُ, I would not stop traveling, I will continue to travel, حَتَّى أَبْلُغَ مَجْمَعَ الْبَحْرَيْنِ. This is the sign that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him, and other signs, till I reach مجمع البحرين. مجمع البحرين, when the two seas meet. And there are parts of the world where you have two seas, they meet. Where is exactly? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. So this is not something that we need to be concerned about, or where is it? What's the position of it? Is it something to do with the Mediterranean Sea and the Nile when it reaches, or something else? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. This is not something that or the Nile when it meet, and these types of things, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, and it's not mentioned, so there's no need for us to expand the matter here. So لا أبرح حتى أبلغ مجمع البحرين, till I reach the place where the two seas meet, أو أمضي حقبة, or I continue to travel for a long period of time. And الحقبة, حقبة here with a alif at the end, that means الحقبة is the big portion of time, a long period of time. And the kuffar, لابثين فيها أحقابا, they would stay in the fire for a long period of time. So he's saying to his servant that give up on me. That means I would not quit unless I meet Al-Khadr, the one that he wants to seek knowledge from. So either they reach where the sign has been given to him, or أو أمضي حقبة, keep on traveling non-stop till I find him. And that by itself, it shows the strength of Musa alayhi salam and the virtue of knowledge. And this is how the virtue of knowledge brings to the heart of the righteous ones. And if the hearts are pure, seeking knowledge of the deen of Allah becomes the most valuable thing in the hearts of the believers. And it doesn't matter how long he would travel. And this is how the early generations of Islam, they would seek the knowledge in their localities, and they would travel seeking knowledge, and the great benefits in seeking knowledge and traveling for seeking knowledge if it's feasible. All of that to get oneself closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to have the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then the next verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَلَمَّا بَلَغَ مَجْمَعَ بَيْنِهِمَا نَسِيَ حُوتَهُمَا فَاتَّخَذَ سَبِيلَهُ فِي الْبَحْرِ سَرَبًا. But when they reached the junction between them, they forgot their fish, and it took its course into the sea, slipping away. So now this is another sign. فَلَمَّا بَلَغَ مَجْمَعَ بَيْنِهِمَا. So they reached the majma', or the junction between the two seas. But then when they reached نَسِيَ حُوتَهُمَا, they forgot their hut, they forgot their fish. And they had a fish with them, whether it was salted so that it sustained the journey. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, and the ulama of the tafsir would mention that in their tafsir. So they had it with them as means of provisions for them to eat on the way. So when they reached the junction between the two seas, they left the place. They forgot their fish. نَسِيَ حُوتَهُمَا فَاتَّخَذَ سَبِيلَهُ فِي الْبَحْرِ سَرَبًا. When they forgot the fish and they left, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the fish took its path to the sea. The fish took its path to the sea by the will of Allah. Water came into it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave it life. It went to the sea. So it disappeared. So they forgot it and they left, and then the fish by itself left by the will of Allah. فَاتَّخَذَ سَبِيلَهُ. He took his path to the sea, saraba, in such a way, in a smooth way. So now the fish disappeared from its place. Now Musa alayhi salam and Al-Khadr, they do not yet remember where is the fish. They just left. They forgot it there. The next verse, it says, verse number 62, فَلَمَّا جَاوَزَ قَالَ لِفَتَاهُ آتِنَا غَدَاءَنَا لَقَدْ لَقِينَا مِنْ سَفَرِنَا هَذَا نَصَبًا. So when they had passed beyond it, Musa alayhi salam said to his boy, bring us our morning meal. We have certainly suffered in this. Our journey must fatigue. فَلَمَّا جَاوَزَ. When they passed beyond the point that they have been given as a sign, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him as a sign that this is where he's going to find Al-Khadr. So when they passed that spot, قال لفتاه, Musa alayhi salam said to his servant, آتنا غداءنا. Bring for us our food. Al-Ghada is something that is given during the day. Different than Al-Asha, which is the dinner. لقد لقينا من سفرنا هذا نصبا. Indeed, we suffered nasaba, fatigue, tiredness from our traveling. If you see the previous verse, he said, أو أمضي حقبة. Either I find the junction between the two seas, or I'm going to keep on traveling for a long period of time. It shows the energy and it shows the eagerness to keep on going. But now in this verse, when they passed the point where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him as a sign that this is where he's going to meet the Khadr, then the fatigue, something that they suffered from, which as the ulama, they say this is what happened to a person when he transgress the limits beyond what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from oneself. Of course, Musa alayhi salam did not intentionally do so. He's looking for Al-Khadr. But it shows here a nasab or a ta'ab. When a person do the acts that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded us to do in the proper way, then by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the person will be helped. So this was also a sign for him to rest, so that he does not go too far before he would go back to the spot. And that's by the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon Musa alayhi salam. فَلَمَّا جَاوَزَ, both of them, and this is in the dual tense. قَالَ لِفَتَاهُ آتِنَا غَدَاءَنَا. He said to his servant, آتِنَا غَدَاءَنَا, bring our lunch for us, or breakfast. لَقَدْ لَقِينَا مِنْ سَفَرِنَا هَذَا. Indeed, we suffered a great fatigue and tiredness from our traveling. Now they'll discover that the fish is missing, and this is where he's going to return back to the spot where they transgressed, or they passed, where he's going to meet Al-Khadr. The next ayah, قال أرأيت إذ أوينا إلى الصخرة فإني نسيت الحوت وما أنسانيه إلا الشيطان أن أذكره واتخذ سبيله في البحر عجبا. He said, did you see when we retired to the rock? Indeed, I forgot there the fish, and none made me forget it except Shaitan, Satan, that I should mention it. And it took its course into the sea amazingly. So he said to him, أرأيت إذ أوينا إلى الصخرة. He said to Musa alayhi salam, what do you think? أرأيت, what do you think? If we go back, أوينا, الإيواء is to seek refuge. So to retire to go to the rock that they were previously at. Why? Because فإني نسيت الحوت. He said, I forgot the fish there. وما أنسانيه إلا الشيطان أن أذكره. What made me forget the fish is the shaitan. Shaitan, he tried to make people forget things. This is his way. He whispers always to the people. And to attribute this to the shaitan. وما أنسانيه إلا الشيطان أن أذكره, for me to remember. واتخذ سبيله في البحر عجبا, and it took its course into the sea amazingly. This is all by the will of Allah, as it's mentioned before also, that it took it in a smooth way. So when he said that to Musa alayhi salam, and they returned back, he says in the next verse, قال ذلك ما كنا نبغي فارتد على آثارهما قصصا. When he said that to Musa alayhi salam, he said, now this is what we were seeking. So they returned following their footprints. This is the signs that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told them to look for to find Al-Khadr. Now Musa alayhi salam, he realized that this is the sign, now it's achieved. They reached their destination, and now they're about to meet Al-Khadr عليه السلام. قال ذلك ما كنا نبغي. نبغي, that means this is what we're seeking, this is what we want, exactly. فارتد, they returned, and الردة is when someone renegade back. So فارتد على آثارهما, they want to reach the exact same spot. So al-athar is the traces, and now آثارهما, the footsteps, going back exactly so that they don't miss it. قصص, looking for it one after the other. When a person يقتص الأثر, that means he's looking for the footsteps, for the footprints, so that he would follow it exactly. That's why the word al-qasas, or stories, comes from this root meaning, because you listen to a story to follow the footsteps of those who are right and good and so on. So now what happened when they returned back? This is what the next verse would say to us, inshallah, but we'll do that after the break, inshallah. Stay with us, inshallah.
محمد رسول الله محمد رسول الله.
Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah. We'll come back and with verses 60 to 70 from Surat Al-Kahf, and the story, or the beginning of the story of Musa alayhi salam and Al-Khadr. And right after some of the traveling that Musa alayhi salam went through, and his servant, and now they find the signs where now they're going to see Al-Khadr, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him certain signs. If he sees it, that means he's close to see Al-Khadr, and this is where we stopped. Then they return back to the rock where they forgot the fish at. So verse number 65 says, فَوَجَدَ عَبْدًا مِّنْ عِبَادِنَا آتَيْنَاهُ رَحْمَةً مِّنْ عِنْدِنَا وَعَلَّمْنَاهُ مِنْ لَدُنَّا عِلْمًا. They found a servant from among our servants to whom we had given mercy from us and had taught him from us a certain knowledge. So فَوَجَدَ عَبْدًا مِّنْ عِبَادِنَا. This is Al-Khadr. They found a slave of ours from the ibad of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this is in a context that is praising Al-Khadr alayhi salam. آتَيْنَاهُ رَحْمَةً مِّنْ عِنْدِنَا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provided for him mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a person to be a believer, to be steadfast upon the deen, to humble oneself, and to understand the purpose of this life. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala وَعَلَّمْنَاهُ مِنْ لَدُنَّا عِلْمًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught him from him ilman, knowledge, that only Al-Khadr alayhi salam, he got to know this knowledge. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught him this knowledge. And that's why it's by the statement of the Qur'an, this is for Al-Khadr and not for anyone else except the messenger of Allah. So for someone to claim to know the unseen or to do the like of the acts, what it's going to mention about Al-Khadr, this is not permissible for anyone to do so. Otherwise, it opens the gate of all kinds of lies and people claiming things that is of no validity to it whatsoever. And if it was to happen, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have revealed to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. So he was someone that received the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a believer, being someone that is obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught him, and as you see, وَعَلَّمْنَاهُ مِنْ لَدُنَّا عِلْمًا, from ourselves. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught him knowledge from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that this is as a great favor from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala unto him. So Musa alayhi salam then said to him, as the next verse, قال له موسى هل أتبعك على أن تعلمني مما علمت رشدا. Musa alayhi salam said to him, may I follow you on the condition that you teach me from what you have been taught of sound judgment. So Musa alayhi salam is asking, and that's the adab or the manners of someone that is a seeker of knowledge. He did not say, I'm Musa, one of the great messengers of Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent me as a messenger to the people of Bani Israel. And of course, he's of a higher level of virtue than Al-Khadr. So he did not give him a command, then I should follow you to learn from you because I'm so and so. But rather, he humbled himself. And that's how a person always, when he's a seeker of knowledge, to humble oneself to the ones that he's seeking knowledge from. So, قال له موسى هل أتبعك? Can I follow you? Such a humble request from him when he has, again, as we said, of a higher status than Al-Khadr. على أن تعلمني مما علمت رشدا. Can I follow you so that you could teach me of what you have been taught of rushda, sound judgment, and the right judgment and the right decision to be made in many circumstances. And it's by the revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he wanted to learn this from Al-Khadr. And as we said, as we heard here, the etiquettes and the manners that he had to observe, which brings a benefit here. It's when we said about the level of Musa alayhi salam is of a higher level. But the prophets of Allah, the righteous ones, the people of knowledge, they teaches us because it's about the state that they're in, the situation that they're in. What I mean by this is, or occupation, for example, if you have a teacher and you are a student, then it doesn't matter who you are. Your teacher is your teacher. So whether the teacher is, say, he is teaching you something, and that same teacher is learning from you everything. But in a certain context, he's your teacher. So while you are learning from the teacher, you have to observe the etiquettes of a student of a teacher. You understand how things are. If a person is, for example, a leader, then he has to be respected because he's a leader, to be obeyed in matters of ma'ruf, matters of goodness, because he's a leader. He's a person of authority, regardless of the individual, whether he is good or bad. Of course, not in obedience and sins. Why? Because of that position. The relationship between husband and wife, right? So the wife, when she's obedient to her husband in matters of goodness, it's because he is her husband, not because he's that great husband of virtue and so on, not necessarily, right? And the same thing when the husband is being kind to his wife and being extremely kind and gentle and lenient towards her, right? It's because she is his wife. She is his wife, not because of how great she is and so on. So this concept of understanding our position, our role that we are observing, this is very important. And we learn from these verses, these matters. So Musa alayhi salam, again, he did not come with the status or the position of being a prophet of Allah. That means you have to listen to me and you have to follow me, but rather he's now coming as a student of knowledge. So he's asking and observing the etiquettes of seeking knowledge. Because this is again a trial of knowledge. هل أتبعك? Can I follow you? على أن تعلمني مما علمت رشدا, so that I would learn some of what you have been taught, rujda, of good conduct or judgment. So then Al-Khadr, he replied to him by saying, قال إنك لن تستطيع معي صبرا. He said, indeed, with me you will never be able to have patience. قال إنك لن تستطيع معي صبرا. You won't be able to have patience whatsoever. It's beyond your capacity. So Al-Khadr is being nasih and having the concern and the sincere nasiha to Musa alayhi salam, that this path is something that require for you extreme patience, because you'll see things, as we know this and we get to know from the story. So you have to be patient, otherwise don't go forward. It requires patience. And the same thing actually can be said when it comes to whatever knowledge a person is about to seek. And the teacher should be honest and truthful, and not just to maybe say, I don't want to disappoint the student. So someone that does not befit or not ready yet for a certain class, there may be some prerequisites, but you feel bad, you don't want to embarrass him. Or maybe that student is of a status, or his father is the king or the president, so you don't want to say no, otherwise he's going to be upset. But you are cheating. Why? Because you're doing a bad service to that student. Because the knowledge that is in this class, for example, or that class, is beyond his level. He's not yet up to that level yet. So as a way to be kind to the student is to be able to place him in the right place. And many students, they don't understand that. If they don't understand it, that means they don't respect and honor their teacher. Maybe they don't trust their teacher. So then if you don't trust him, why would you seek knowledge from him? So the student has to find the right teacher with knowledge and actions and so on. And the teacher has to be kind to the students by making sure that they receive the benefiting knowledge. A teacher, for example, he is of high level of knowledge, so he brings students in the first level of knowledge, and he wants to teach them something that requires 5-10 years to study first before he can get into this level, thinking this is how to articulate oneself. It doesn't work this way. So that's why he warned them. He says, إِنَّكَ لَن تَسْتَطِيعَ مَعِيَ صَبْرًا. You won't be able to have patience with me. And as-sabr is to withhold oneself, is to imprison oneself because of a goodness or a matter of goodness that is waiting for you. And the entire deen is based on being patient. Being patient to be obedient to Allah. وَاسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ. Seek help in patience and salah. And he mentioned to him why would he then becomes difficult for him to be patient, as the next verse says, وَكَيْفَ تَصْبِرُ عَلَى مَا لَمْ تُحِطُ بِهِ خُبْرًا. And how can you have patience for what you do not encompass in knowledge? وَكَيْفَ تَصْبِرُ. He is giving him the excuse. You won't be able to be patient because وَكَيْفَ تَصْبِرُ. How can you have patience? عَلَى مَا لَمْ تُحِطُ بِهِ خُبْرًا. For something that you are not, did not encompass in knowledge. When a person doesn't know exactly what he needs to be patient for, it becomes very difficult. Someone is put in front of him the best dish on the face of earth, and he's hungry, and he's told, sit right there and be patient, don't eat now. He wants to know why, just to know why. But if he's not given the news of why, he's just to be ordered, not now, and that's it. It becomes very difficult. So when a person is seeking something and he knows and he understands the meaning of it and why is it being done, it becomes easy for the person to accept, even if it's difficult. But part of the ubudiyyah to Allah, part of the obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that sometimes a person might not know the reason behind it or the wisdom behind it. To test that individual whether he's going to be in state of submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or not. So he is informing him that you're about to face things that requires patience, and you don't seem or you won't have this capacity as a human being because you didn't encompass it with knowledge, with understanding, because you won't be able to, because it's beyond your understanding. So then he said to him afterwards, قال ستجدني إن شاء الله صابرا ولا أعصي لك أمرا. Which means that you would find me by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Musa alayhi salam said, you will find me, if Allah wills, patient, and I would not disobey you in any order. قال ستجدني إن شاء الله. So you will find me inshallah by the will of Allah. And this is how the etiquette's in saying something, because it's about something in the future, that you would find me inshallah by the will of Allah, sabiran, patient. And Musa alayhi salam, of course, he was sincere in saying this. And he did not know that the matter would be difficult for him to be patient and to be silent of what he's seeing. So, but he said, you would find me inshallah ta'ala patient. وَلَا أَعْصِي لَكَ أَمْرًا. And I would not disobey any command of yours. That means you would find me the best companion then, so that he can learn. So that he can learn the knowledge that he's trying to seek. And that's why also to have patience in seeking knowledge and not to be disobedient, especially when the matter is in the ma'ruf and matters of goodness. These are the means to gain as much knowledge as a person can attain. And always the subject of sabr and patience. And sometimes a person might have the patience not to ask questions at the time being, so that the matter becomes clearer later or so. So we'll continue inshallah ta'ala with the last verse and some of the lessons learned before we continue to the rest of the story. But right after the break, so stay with us inshallah.
محمد رسول الله محمد رسول الله.
Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah. We'll come back and with the story of Musa alayhi salam and Al-Khadr, as mentioned in Surat Al-Kahf. Only the first 10 verses in that particular surah, or particular story. And here we stopped at where the verse that Musa alayhi salam, he said to Al-Khadr, when Al-Khadr told him that you won't be able to be patient if you want to follow me and that you want to be with me to learn the knowledge. You won't be able to be patient because you won't be able to encompass what you see. And as you see in the story, this is something that proved to be truth. So Musa alayhi salam, he said, قال ستجدني إن شاء الله صابرا ولا أعصي لك أمرا. Musa alayhi salam, he said, you will find me, if Allah wills, patient, and I will not disobey you in any order. This is, as we said, Musa alayhi salam was sincere, of course, Prophet of Allah. So he's saying to him, ستجدني, you would find me, inshallah, by the will of Allah. Everything is by the will of Allah. And when someone says something, inshallah, this is the etiquettes with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because this is a matter in the future. And only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. But it's something, if it's in the past, a person just would say it the way it is. But here it shows that something the ulama they mention, which is a very important lesson for us. One of the things that can be a life changing, right? There is difference between having al-azm, or the determination upon something, versus the actual doing of that something, right? So Musa alayhi salam here is being tested. And Al-Khadr, he told him, you have to have patience. And I don't think that you will be able to have patience. So Musa alayhi salam, he said, you would find me patient. So now this is what? This is action? This is an act of patience? Or this is having the determination, the intentions that he will be patient, right? This is the determination. He's determined. He wants to be patient. So it's not showing yet. And I would never disobey any command of yours. Later on, Musa alayhi salam was not having this patience. So that's why al-azm is one thing, to be determined, to have the strong intention upon something is one thing, but the action might lag behind. And that's all by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore, a person has to make sure that when the means are taken, it's taken based on also one's capacity. And if we use that principle in our life, for a person to have determination in doing something, that he wants to memorize every day a surah of the, a page of the Qur'an, for example, of the Mus'haf. Every day he would memorize one page. So this is his determination. But would he be able to apply this in action? This is something that needs or require a person to see whether he has the means to it. Of course, the matters of sincerity and what's the intentions behind it, and also the time and the age and all these types of things. So the action might lag behind. So that's why the determination should be according to one's capacity, to one's best effort, of course, to understand this. So this is basically what the benefit of this verse, as one of the benefits of this verse, that he said that to him. قال, then the next verse, Al-Khadr, he said to Musa alayhi salam, قال فإن اتبعتني فلا تسألني عن شيء حتى أحدث لك منه ذكرا. So he said to him, then if you follow me, do not ask me about anything until I make to you about it mention. So this is now the patience that he's commanding Musa alayhi salam to observe, that he said that you won't be able to do it because you won't be able to encompass what you're seeing. So he says, قال فإن اتبعتني. He said to him, فإن اتبعتني, if you follow me, then this is a musharata, this is a condition, this is like a contract between them that they would agree upon, otherwise they cannot be together. That he said to him, فلا تسألني عن شيء. Do not ask me about anything. حتى أحدث لك منه ذكرى, till I initiate for you, till I say something or mention anything about it. That means you don't ask, and therefore you would see things, don't ask. And to be able to understand conditions or commands, this is a great favor of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon a person. Really, of course, here in this case, Musa alayhi salam understood very well, but it was beyond his capacity, as Al-Khadr said to him. But in other situations, when a person is being or given a command to do something to be done, then the person should have the sincerity that he wants to be upon it, and that he needs to understand how to be obedient. Right? I would give an example. If you have a child and you would say to your child, get me a glass of water, or lock the door from the inside, something like this. This is a command. You're saying to your child, please go lock the door. So your child starts questioning it. Why should I lock it? Is there a reason why we need to lock it? Like this. Sometimes, of course, if you give them an answer, it's a good thing for them to understand the reason why. But sometimes you might not have to say the reason behind it. Why? Because he needs to train himself to be obedient to what is good, of course, to what is ma'ruf. Right? People don't have to question every command that they're commanded to do. What's the reason behind it? They don't have to. If a person is working for a company and the company said this is how the work procedure will be, they don't have to ask. It doesn't matter to them. Of course, if they want to be given advice or something like this is different. And that's why Musa alayhi salam, he saw what appears to him something that is wrong. So how can he not ask when he sees it clearly? And that contradicted with a foundation in him, which is another subject, actually, by the way, that you can extract from it rulings. He has general terms of making sure that this is permissible, this is not permissible. But then you have something here that is exceptional situations. So when to be able to be patient and whatnot, this is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded the believers even to learn. So فَلَا تَسْأَلْنِي عَنْ شَيْءٍ, do not ask me about anything حَتَّى أُحْدِثَ لَكَ مِنْهُ ذِكْرًا, till I am the one that would mention or to make a mention to it for you. So then after that, the verses will talk about what did they go from one incident to the other, but we'll do that inshallah ta'ala next time. But the ways that we see how Musa alayhi salam is seeking this knowledge from Al-Khadr and how the matter was given with a condition at the end. And this is something that is valid to happen between people, and to humble oneself to the knowledge, and they have to fulfill the condition as long as it's permissible, not something that is not permissible. So when we look back into these verses and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned the story to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, to see the importance of knowledge. And the knowledge, a person has to prepare himself, even though it's a very clear examples as it's going to be mentioned, encompasses these matters of knowledge is important. But when we talk about the knowledge of the revelation from Allah, the Qur'an and the Sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and clearly a believer believe in that. So the concern of the believer is to understand what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from him. Not that the concern is of how to turn away from the commands of Allah, how to play tricks so that a person does not fulfill the commands of Allah. This is evil, of course. So that's why when a person is training himself, when we raise our children to be able to obey orders, to understand what is the order is, and for them to apply it, and especially, of course, the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be established, and for people to follow it and to hold fast to it. This is a trial that, as we see here, that Al-Khadr, he took this condition and this covenant from Musa alayhi salam, that he would not ask for anything till he inform him and initiate something of informing him about what happens. And that's by the will of Al-Khadr, not the way of Musa alayhi salam. And how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when there are signs, a person needs to follow the signs. And when a person is doing beyond what he's been commanded to do, this is a bad sign. And it can cause for the person not to be able to continue, because it's important to know the miqdar, the level and the measurements, the type, the amount of goodness that needs to be observed. All of that is needed and is required for the person to attain, for them to do what is good. And the mercy is the mercy of Allah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most merciful. And when a person is taught a knowledge from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he should humble himself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this knowledge of the Qur'an and the Sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam is by Allah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one that guides whoever He wills subhanahu wa ta'ala to learn the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As we heard the etiquettes, and there are many things that can show these etiquettes that Musa alayhi salam observed towards the teacher. And this is one of the ways to attain as much knowledge as a person can from their teacher. And the concern of seeking knowledge is to be upright, is to do what is right, is to the words of wisdom for a person to apply in their life according to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. The truthfulness, the sincerity, that should not prevent the person from saying things the way it is, and not to try to please anyone in the disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and how the relationships should be established. And as the Prophet ﷺ, even when he said to two people that are traveling, only two, he said, تَطَاوَعَ وَلَا تَخْتَلِفَ. That means obey one another and do not be in dispute with one another. That means it doesn't have to be that one is the boss and the other one has to listen to, unless there is some circumstances, but rather it's to help each other, to be obedient to one another, to bring what is goodness and to push away any disputes and things of that nature. And when the follow is when a person follows someone of knowledge, he follows him. And of course, if it's someone that is receiving revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is something that is not to be questioned whatsoever. But he's preparing Musa alayhi salam for what he's going to be and about to see from the actions of Al-Khadr alayhi salam. Now, when we go into the next verses and talks about the incidents, we will see how the secrets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the face of earth. But before we get to that, it's a very important disclaimer and an important thing for us to understand that those who claim that they meet Al-Khadr these days, they're all upon falsehood. There's no evidence to establish this whatsoever. And it's a way for people to deviate from the religion. Why? Because they would justify some of these actions that are mentioned in the verses. That's why this is, if someone claims this, that a person should run away from. And these people, if he was alive, he would have came to the Prophet ﷺ, and this is the proper understanding of it, that he died ﷺ, like everybody else. It's just why that individual, this character, especially some of the deviant ones, they want to cause these fitan. Why? So that they would open the door in changing matters in the religion, which is, of course, it's been completed, it's been perfected, and no one is allowed to do that by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We'll stop here, inshallah ta'ala, although the story continues, but because of the time, we'll continue, inshallah ta'ala, next time. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us among those who learn and benefit from the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to keep us steadfast upon the truth. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
إلا الذين تابوا وأصلحوا وبينوا فأولئك أتوب عليهم وأنا التواب الرحيم.
فادعوا الله مخلصين له الدين ولو كره الكافرون.
يا زكريا إنا نبشرك بغلام.
يا أيها النبي إنا أرسلناك شاهدا ومبشرا